Hey, what's everyone? It's Kyler and welcome to Kids Worship Online. We are in a brand new series called Interrupted, where we are learning about what it means to be interrupted with our time. And so to start off, I want you guys to think about, when are you interrupted the most? Is it maybe when you're watching YouTube, with the little ads, and it's like some ads you can skip, some ads you have to watch the whole thing. Those interrupt your video, especially when it's right in the middle of something. Or maybe like a commercial during a TV show. Maybe you're watching a football game, or you're watching a movie or a TV show, and then it just stops right in the middle, like right before the best part, and it gives you an ad. And sometimes interruptions are like things that you like maybe it's a toy that you see, or maybe like your favorite restaurant, or something that you really enjoy. But sometimes it can be not that really convenient, or something that you don't like. But what we see is that Jesus was interrupted with his time. There's many times that he was going about what he was doing, and people would come up to him and interrupt what he was doing. And so we're going to look at a story in Mark chapter 5 about a time where Jesus was interrupted in his time. So just to give you a little backstory, Jesus was teaching. There's a large crowd following him. And so he gets to the sea, and then he's going to go across to essentially just kind of get away from people and have a little break. But by the time he gets to the other side, the people had followed him. And so he gets to the other side, and he starts to kind of be about his own business. And there was a man named Jairus. And Jairus came up, and he falls to the feet of Jesus, and he says, "Jesus, my daughter is dying. Will you come and heal her?" And so that's interruption number one. Okay, so he gets interrupted. It actually says this in Mark 5, verse 25 through 28. Later, is that he's saying, Jairus, okay, I'll go with you. But then as he starts to walk, a crowd comes and someone steps forward and touches his robe. It says this in Mark 5, 25 through 28. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years. For 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can touch his robe, I will be healed. So this woman had a medical condition that no doctor could help. And she went to lots of doctors and tried many things, but none of it worked. So she thought that she would step forward and touch, if only she could touch his robe, she would be healed. And so this is another interruption, because she does it in verse 29. And so she touches his robe, and it says this: immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. And Jesus realized that once the healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" So who touched his robe? We know who it was. It was a woman. And so Jesus he asked, and she comes forward and says, "I was the one who touched your robe." And he says, "Because of your faith, daughter, your faith." It says this in verse 34. "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." Now, could you imagine if you're the woman, you have been sick for 12 years, just constant bleeding, and in one moment, one touch, you are healed. Now, that kind of interruption is a great interruption, right? For her, and maybe even for Jesus, being able to just heal this woman. But the first interruption, though, that one still hasn't happened yet. And it actually says this, as Jesus is talking with the woman, that this happens. This message comes. And it says in Mark 5:35, while he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus and the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use in troubling the teacher now." Now, before we keep going, I want you guys to think about this. It's one statement. Jesus was generous with his time. Jesus was generous with his time. We have opportunities in our life that we get interrupted, and we have the opportunity to be generous with our time. Maybe you have siblings, and your siblings may want to do something that you do not want to do. but we can be generous with our time and go, you know what, it's not even being selfish, but we just want to serve and really be with the people and be generous with our time. We learned about this a little bit last week when we were talking about high generosity, is that generosity is giving something without expecting anything in return. And so when we think about our time, is that we can give our time and serve people and spend time doing things for others. And that actually is a way that we can be like Jesus, because Jesus did it too. Now, before we keep going, there's opportunities for us to do this even outside of our family, like with our siblings. You know, there are things that we can do without even being asked. Like maybe there are things that you see around the house that it would take some time to do them and you don't get anything in return, but really it would be a blessing for someone else, or it would actually help them do something else. It would give them more time to do something else. And that's another way that we can be generous with our time. And so let's keep seeing how the story plays out. So it's not, Jesus gets interrupted with the lady to go in peace. He says, go in peace, like you have been healed. And he's interrupted again. But how would you feel if you were Jairus? Okay, you were the first one to interrupt Jesus. Jesus, come heal my daughter. And he gets interrupted on the way. So you kind of like stop and wait. Maybe you've experienced this with your parents, maybe. Like you're like, oh, let's go. But they keep talking to like maybe friends. And you're like, oh, I'm really hungry. Come on, go eat lunch or dinner. Well, the same thing was happening. Jairus is waiting, knowing that his daughter was dying. And then they get the message that the daughter is dead. But here's the thing, is that Jesus overheard this in Mark 5:36. But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. So think about this. Jesus said, no one in the crowd can come with us except these three people, and obviously Jairus. And they go to the house, so they leave everyone behind. And they get to the house, and everyone is sad, weeping, very somber. They're wailing. They're in great commotion. And maybe Jesus should have stayed focused on the first task and not allowed himself to be interrupted. You know, maybe it would have been better to go and save Jairus' daughter, but let's see how the story plays out. It says in 39, he went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and the three disciples into the room where the girl was laying. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha cum. Everyone say, you can say Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. How amazing is that? That is like the coolest thing, that Jesus, even though he was interrupted on his way, still was able to serve and be generous with his time and call the girl to wake up. Now, what does this mean for us? There are times in our lives where we can get so caught up with the things that we have to do, like our schedule and what we have to do on different days, but our interruptions actually are God's opportunities for us to minister to the world through him. So if you think about this, maybe you have a practice or a birthday party to go to, and the plans just don't work out. The plans don't work out, and you're not able to go. And maybe if we had a different perspective, instead of thinking, I can't believe I can't go, I wanted to do this. Maybe it's our opportunity to be generous with our time, to actually maybe help a sibling or even your parents. Maybe your parents are really tired of having to go all these different places for you. Oh, excuse me. And just because you can't go to one thing actually may give them rest or some peace. And so what if we thought that the times that we're interrupted are actually the best opportunities to live like Jesus? There's a guy who's now dead. He was a professor. He taught about the Bible. And one of his students asked him, how would you describe Jesus in one word? What would you characterize him as? Happy, maybe on mission. And the word that he gave them was relaxed. Think about the word relaxed. What do we think when we think of the word relaxed? Sometimes I think about reclining back, just relaxing, maybe not having to do anything. But actually, the way that he explained what relaxed was, he was never in a rush. You know, he allowed himself to be interrupted, and he was very generous with his time, but he was never in a hurry. He was always very relaxed. And I think that's one of the ways that we could be generous with our time, is being relaxed with our time, is knowing that God has given us all this time already, and all we can do, or one of the things we can do, is just give it back to him and serve him, serve people, and being generous with our time. And one of the ways that you can do that, our mission partner is still Operation Christmas Child. And so you can pick up a box at any one of our campuses and fill it up and send it. You know, it may take time after church, or maybe an afternoon or evening, to go to a store and fill up the box. But that's actually one way that we can be generous with our time. We can give that time to do something for someone else and not expect anything in return. So can't wait to chat with you guys next week as we continue our series, Interrupted.